entrando em contato com atendimento ao cliente. Para muitas pessoas é um jeito fácil de arruinar um bom dia, mas na Zendesk nós deixamos a experiência do cliente melhor. Melhor para sua avó, melhor para o seu vendedor preferido de flores, melhor para o cara do apartamento 3A, melhor para você, melhor para todos. Porque enquanto alguns dizem que o cliente sempre tem razão, nós dizemos que o cliente é sempre humano. E como seres humanos, queremos fazer algo melhor para todos nós. Zendesk, experiência do cliente com IA desenvolvida para humanos.
Quer desenvolver os talentos da sua equipe e potencializar os resultados da sua empresa? Conte com a expertise do atendimento corporativo do Senac São Paulo, que já capacitou mais de 1 milhão de pessoas e profissionais de instituições públicas, privadas e terceiro setor. Construa uma equipe altamente motivada e capacitada e destaque-se no mercado. Entre em contato, acesse sp.senac.br/corporativo e saiba mais. Quer saber? Senac.
Welcome to Nature2Need's podcast, where we speak with entrepreneurs and investors about the green future. My name is Tarmo Virki, and today my guest is Sid from Nature2Need. Welcome to Nature2Need, Sid. Tell me what you're building.
Sure, Tarmo, nice to see you again. So what I'm currently working on is basically a manufacturing business, and we are trying to decarbonize the plastic industry. Focusing specifically on the raw materials. As you probably know, and your audience knows, plastics are largely based on fossil fuels, not so much the fuel part, but on crude oil, right? Plastics are made from crude oil, and they've been around for over 100 years. Plastics are great material. They're very versatile. They're very abundant. They're very cheap. That's why they're everywhere. But unfortunately, there is a lot of carbon emissions released in the production of plastics, extraction of the oil, production of the plastics. This is not even getting into the plastic waste problem, but we're focused more on the front end of the plastics value chain, trying to reduce the carbon footprint of the actual material down to zero, or in some case, even negative emissions or below net zero.
How can you have a negative emissions?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it's fun to talk about. So basically, plastics, as I mentioned a couple minutes ago, it's the raw material of plastics is crude oil plus a bunch of chemicals to give it its properties and such. And in the course of producing these polymers, greenhouse gases are produced. Our approach is we actually start with the same starting materials, but instead of using 100% oil or oil-based polymers to create plastics, we actually use Mother Nature. So we use agricultural residues. These are things like rice husks, coffee husks, anything that's left over from the crop growing process. And our proprietary technology, we're able to incorporate high amounts of that, up to about 40% by dry weight, into the polymer. And if you look at it from a carbon accounting point of view, the biomass, these agricultural residues, when plants are growing, as you probably know, they're actually absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, right? We talk about carbon capture technology. This is probably the original, the cheapest, and the best carbon capture technology. And so these agricultural residues, they're actually a carbon sink, right? And what we do is we take the agricultural residues, we process them in a special way, and we incorporate them with oil-based plastics. And through if you look at the carbon footprint from all the steps to make it, all the processing and everything, and especially if we recycled plastics as part of our inputs, we can get the total net carbon footprint down below zero for the materials.
How far are you in the process of creating the plant or the production facility?
Yeah, actually, we've been operating for a few years.
Wow.
My co-founder, who started the business, he started in 2017. And I can tell you a little bit more about his background in a couple of minutes. But to answer your question, we started the company in 2017. I wasn't involved at the time. I've been involved for about 4 months now. And so we do have a factory already. It's up and running, and we can produce about 4,000 tons of our plastic, decarbonized plastic raw material per year, 4,000 tons a year. This is in Zhejiang province, China, which is about a few hours southwest of Shanghai. And we're supplying our materials now to a handful of customers. Most of them are consumer-facing brands from Europe, from Australia. There's a few big customers in China as well. And so we've been operating for a while. Right now, we are in the process of raising funds to scale up our production and our marketing efforts, because we believe we have a really impactful product, and we want to get the word out and get more awareness and scale up production.
Because 4,000 tons of plastic, even though it's a huge amount, it doesn't sound very much compared to the kind of global plastic use.
That's correct. I mean, the global plastic industry is huge. I mean, the market we're looking at is these plastic pellets. So some folks in the audience might not be aware that, okay, so plastics are made from oil and some other chemicals, but basically through a process called compounding, we produce pellets, these little plastic pellets. It almost looks like a fish bait or something like that. Yeah. And these plastic pellets are sent to the next companies in the plastic value chain, which are called converters. So what the converters will do is they'll take these pellets and they'll melt them down and mold them into the various plastic products we see every day. So this is through the process of injection molding or extrusion molding, or in the case of bottles, it's called blow molding. So yeah, it's a huge industry. I mean, the whole plastics industry globally, it's 600 billion US about. The segment we're looking at is just the raw material, the pellets, and that's about a $10 billion market globally.
How big part of the bottle you can, or how big part of the plastic you can replace with biomaterials?
Yeah. So this is one of the first questions we get, right? Our materials, just like there's dozens of different plastic formulations, we also have dozens of formulations for our biomaterials. And this is for different use cases, different price points, different performance characteristics. But a general benchmark that we use is we can replace about 70% of the types of plastics that are currently being used in the world. Maybe it's easier if I say what we can't do, because we are using biomass, agricultural residues in our formulation. We cannot do clear, transparent plastic. Right, so that probably rules out like water bottles that are typically clear for marketing reasons. But we can have like a translucent color. There's always going to be some color from the biomass, right? With our plastics, we can also do packaging and single-use plastics. But my business partner and I, we have a strong preference to try to minimize the single-use plastics we do. It's because there's enough plastic waste in the world.
Exactly.
We want to focus more on durable plastics, things that are used for years, if not decades, things that can be recycled into new products at end of life. We have a certain product line, certain formulations where it's compostable or biodegradable. So that might work in the packaging arena. But I think even though I'm in the plastics industry now, I still believe that we should be producing less plastic, right? People talk about reuse, reduce, recycle. I think the first step is reduce, right? Try to reduce the amount of plastic we actually produce.
What about the competitive situation? I assume that using the bio ingredients in the plastic is not only the fault of your company, but I assume there are some other companies trying to do something similar.
All the companies I'm aware of, we're kind of approaching the problem different ways, and because it's kind of a new area, I don't really see anyone as a direct competitor yet. Probably the closest company is there's one company in Mexico, and they are using avocado seeds, avocado pits, to make forks and spoons and tableware and things like that. And they're focused on disposable biodegradable plastic. There's other companies like one company I really admire in the UK. It's called Notpla, and they're using seaweed to try to replace plastic films, right? So this is completely bio-based, and it would dissolve. I think even some of their films are edible. But I think where we're different is, like I mentioned earlier, we're focusing on durable plastics, right? Yeah. So these things that used for, let's say, casings for your computer, home electronics, appliances at home. We have some projects for interior automotive parts. Building materials is another area we're looking to get into, things that would be used for a really long time. And so I think the other thing with our technology is we're quite flexible in what type of biomass we can use. Yeah. We have not encountered another company that has developed technology that can accommodate such a wide range of agricultural waste residues. So I think that's kind of our position in the landscape right now.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back after this short break for advertisements. Welcome back. Looking forward, what are the kind of the biggest milestones for you guys this year or next year? You mentioned that you guys are trying to raise capital to grow the business. Where or how do you plan to grow?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, the business has been operating since 2017. There was a bit of a slow period because of COVID.
Of course.
My partner, he's a German composite engineer, got his PhD in Germany, and was working for a big German automotive company that sent him to China 15 years ago. He spent 7 years working for other leading companies in China, building R&D teams, and then he started this company 7 years ago. And so during COVID, things were quite tough for the company in terms of sales. But the positive side of that is that the company kind of turned inward and focused on the R&D, developing really nice formulations for a variety of different plastic use cases. In terms of looking forward now, to answer your question, what we're looking to do is expand our production from China actually to Thailand and Southeast Asia. As you know, I'm based in Thailand. That's where we met last year. And Thailand has a very strong agricultural foundation and infrastructure. So there's plenty of biomass. Some people might know Thailand also has a very strong polymer industry. And so that's both beneficial. Both of those things are beneficial for us. Part of the reason we want to expand production out of China into Thailand is the state of affairs in the world right now. There are trade wars and geopolitics going on. So unfortunately, a lot of our existing and prospective customers in the West, they're reluctant to initiate new projects where they need to source from China, right? So basically, to be able to continue to grow with customers in Western developed countries, we need another manufacturing center outside of Thailand. I'm sorry, outside of China. So that's one area where we would invest. The other area we would invest is our business model actually involves franchising as well, to keep carbon emissions low, to keep costs low. It doesn't make sense for us to ship biomass around the world, right? So we actually want to produce as close as we can to where the sources of biomass are. Our factory in China, for example, we're in a rural area, and just across the street, there's rice mills, there's rice fields, there's bamboo, and we use bamboo cuttings. There's factories that make like tableware and things out of bamboo, and we use their leftovers in our materials. Bamboo is actually a great material to make these composite plastics because it's kind of like carbon fiber or fiberglass. It adds strength to the material and actually makes it lighter. So so we have a franchising model. We just signed an MOU a couple months ago with hopefully our first franchisee. It's going to be in East Africa. It's a woman entrepreneur who already has another bio-based business, and this would be another business that hopefully we can get off the ground in East Africa.
Interesting. In which country?
I guess it would be, I don't want to say exactly the country, but it's in the region of Uganda, Rwanda, Kenya, East Africa area.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So kind of expanding the process and getting it to the franchising it to the new markets. Interesting stuff. How big is the company these days? I mean, the 4,000 tons you kind of mentioned, but does it need, I don't know, 1,000 people working for that, or?
No, actually, right now the company is about 20 people. Okay. And the majority of that is in China, right? We have our factory there. We have a small R&D engineering team. A business partner, the founder, he's the CEO, as well as leading a lot of the R&D projects and the customer collaboration to co-develop projects. Right now in Thailand, it's just myself, and I'm kind of been leading the fundraising and helping more and more with the commercial side of the business. Then we've
building the factory soon, right?
So right now we would need funding to build the factory. But yes, I would be highly involved in at least coordinating that because I'm in Thailand. And really our goal there, because we already have one factory up and running, we know we have a model and it works. In Thailand, we would try to keep our CapEx low by investing in a smaller facility more for prototyping, product validation with customers. And as I mentioned, there's already a quite established polymer industry in Thailand. We're talking with several potential partners in Thailand, to contract manufacture through them, so we don't have to overinvest in the CapEx, right? If they have capacity, then maybe we can work with them to utilize their capacity.
Exactly, and compared to the old polymer industry, I'm sure having a green production line in a classical plastic factory would be quite a scoop for any polymer producer.
Yeah, it's a good point, and maybe one thing I can point out here is that some of your listeners might heard of bioplastics, right? And might be wondering how we're different than bioplastics. We're calling ourselves biomaterials, not bioplastics. It actually is quite a big difference. So bioplastics are typically polymers that are, instead of made from oil, they're made from bio-based feedstock. So usually some kind of starch like cassava, or it might be corn. A common one in Southeast Asia is sugar and sugar canes, right? Tapioca starch. So it goes through a chemical process, fermentation process, to turn those starches and sugars into polymer. So it's quite energy intensive, and really it's similar to oil-based plastics, but you're starting with starches and sugars instead. What we're doing is quite different. So our starting materials are, we will start with conventional plastics, right? Like polypropylene or polyethylene or ABS. Or we can start with even recycled plastics as our starting material. And then through our technology, we mix in the biomass I mentioned. So this would be, rice husk. We've even used peanut shells. Now we're experimenting with durian skins because there's a lot of unused durian skins in Thailand. And we through our processing, we blend in really high amounts of that. It's not a chemical process. It's more, there is some polymerization, but we're not fermenting our biomass, right? We're using it more like a filler, right? I don't like that term because it kind of makes it sound like easy. It's not actually easy, but it's a volume filler that reduces the amount of oil-based plastic we use by a significant amount, right? I mentioned we use agriculture up to 40% by weight, but if you look at it by volume, It can be, 60 or 70% by volume that we're using biomass. And so the process is very different. The product is very different in their properties. And then what you do at end of life is very different as well. So for example, for conventional bioplastics, some countries like Australia actually have banned certain types of bioplastics because they look like normal plastics, but they can't be recycled in the same process as normal plastic. And that kind of screws up the recycling process. So unfortunately, they've had to ban certain types of bioplastics. With our biomaterials, they look different enough because there are some fibers in it. And they can be mechanically recycled just like normal plastics. But one caveat is they would need to be recycled in closed loop systems. So they can't be combined with standard plastics. Yeah.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back after this short break for advertisements. Welcome back. Now we covered quite a lot about your company, the future plans, the processes. Is there something else we should talk about?
Maybe if I could just say a couple things about why companies would want to switch, right? I think there's a lot of sustainable and eco-friendly solutions in the world, whether it's plastics or other things, but why have not these solutions been widely adopted, right? A lot of times it has to do with economics, right? So it might be a great solution, but it costs more than what people are currently doing. And I think that's one very strong advantage of our solution. We've figured out a way, and also competing in China where cost is always something you have to be mindful of. Our decarbonized plastics are actually the same cost as conventional plastics. So there's no green premium for our product, and that makes switching easier. And we're actually quite a bit lower in cost than bioplastics. Bioplastics, because they're basically crops, it costs a lot to grow them. There's land, there's water, there's fertilizer. We don't have to deal with any of that because we're using like crop waste, right? So it's the farmers are happy when we buy this from them, even it's not like at a very high price. It's better than getting nothing for them, right?
Of course.
So that's one aspect. There's no green premium on our product. I think the other question we get sometimes is, everything sounds great. Why haven't more companies jumped on board and start using your products? And the answer to that is it's still a relatively new technology. It's a new material. I think in Europe, as you know, there's more and more regulations kind of pushing company towards decarbonizing their operations, decarbonizing their supply chain. In other parts of the world, like Southeast Asia, where I'm based, there's a lot of talk about sustainability. There is some real action on sustainability, but there's nothing from a regulatory point of view really forcing companies to start measuring their supply chain or decarbonizing their plastics yet. So unfortunately, I think regulation is going to be kind of an accelerator of adoption of our technology. Without regulation, then it's kind of out of the company's good heart rather than economic reasons where they might adopt. Or some companies, maybe they don't have regulations pushing them yet, but they've committed to achieving net zero by a certain date in the near future, and they're being proactive about this kind of stuff.
One thing is regulation. The other part, probably often, which comes together with the regulation, is consumers. So if the regulators are slow to move, then the trust has to be relying with the consumers who are pushing for basically voting with their wallets and deciding to go for the greener choices. Then the companies just have to follow.
Yeah, exactly. Consumers can vote with their dollars, and I just posted something a couple of days ago on my LinkedIn about this, not about my company, but just about people choosing which companies to spend their money with. And I think the challenge with consumers is sometimes not all consumers, obviously I'm generalizing, but sometimes consumers, they don't look too deeply at a company's claims, right? So I know in Europe, they're coming out with a bill kind of anti-greenwashing. So companies have to be able to back up their claims. They can't just say whatever they want. Because consumers, I'm this way myself a lot of times, we don't have the time, or we might be too lazy as consumers to really dig deep to see if the claims are validated or not.
Absolutely, and some of them are clearly over the board. And from the other thing I was thinking that I mean, also the product kind of production chains are often so long that when you make the plastic for the bottle, consumer will buy the product where they don't have a choice of which bottle the drink is coming from, or any of the other materials, right?
Yeah. This is something that I encounter and I think about it a lot. Just the other day I saw a construction site, and they had some tanks there to store their materials to make cement on site. And as you and many people in your audience probably know, like the cement industry, it's definitely a necessary industry, right? But it's one of the highest emitters of greenhouse gases, right? And on this construction site, on the tanks where it stored the sand and the other raw materials to make cement, they had put green colored decals of like environmentally friendly images on the tanks. And I was thinking, does that make green cement? Is that what they mean by green cement?
That exactly. That makes it clearly much greener. I think I saw something similar in Thailand last year, where they had very green posters next to the kind of concrete building site.
Yeah,
it's a nice branding strategy, but of course it doesn't get you very far. But I mean, but for all the listeners out there, we just had a very good episode on the concrete and cement industry and the challenges there. So just look out one of the recent episodes with concrete.ai, where guys were using software to optimize the use of cement in the concrete production, and saying that they can cut 30% of their CO2 emissions with their classical procedures, only changing the mixtures and kind of optimizing the technology there.
Yeah, I listened to that episode. It was a really interesting episode how the entrepreneur was using basically AI and data science to try to, like you said, optimize. I didn't even realize that there were that many different formulations of cement, right? But to try to optimize the formulation so that the emissions were reduced. And it was that episode actually that triggered me to reach out to you, because there's some similarities to what I'm doing. He's trying to decarbonize cement. We're trying to decarbonize the global plastic industry, but we're doing it with I guess with atoms rather than bits and bytes through AI. I mean, there is some AI element to our work. I don't want to overplay it, because I think despite the huge promise of AI, it's overplayed. I don't want to say we're an AI company, but we are a manufacturing company, and
which uses technology to get better results.
So we're using data science. We're trying to hire data scientists right now to help reduce the time it takes for us to optimize our formulations. So we have a ton of experimental data from 7 years of trial and error research, and we want a data scientist who can kind of use this data and help us accelerate the time it takes to come up with new formulations.
Absolutely. So if there is any listener out there who's data scientist and want to change the plastic industry for good, reach out to Sid after they're listening to the episode.
Yeah, please do.
Thanks so much, Sid, for your time, and have a great day.
Thanks, Tomo. You too. Talk to you later.
Hey there, fabulous souls. I'm Stephanie Baklaan.
And I'm Eden Alpert.
And we're the hosts of the brand new podcast, Unapologetically Fab.
Get ready to join us on an amazing and real journey as we dive into life after 40 and own it.
We're all about changing the narrative, leaning into who you are, and living a life by your own design.
Join us as we embrace life unapologetically and redefine success.
This is Unapologetically Fab,
An Electric Cast production.
See you there.
Electricast. Electricast.
Welcome to the Candle Power Hour. Come with us backstage behind the scenes of show business spanning over 4 decades and bringing you the experiences that can only be told by the people who were there.
Our guests are from the A-list, the F-list, and everyone in between. Get set for some of the most insane, hilarious, and inspiring stories you will ever hear.
I'm Mercury.
And I'm Diego.
Your host for the Candle Power Hour.
Electricast.